Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our third edition of the Virtual Project Conference today. We're very excited to have you here for this special focus 2-hour event, where we will provide you and your team with project-specific discussions. We'll be addressing some key topics you shared that were important, including bridging the Agile and traditional PMO worlds, gaining input from real clients and how they've driven successful PPM initiatives, and looking forward to what's new with some of the Microsoft project solutions. We have a special session towards the end of our time together, talking specifically to the current state of project management tools in the market today. So let's get started. My name is Annie Levand, and I'm with a Microsoft Gold partner called PROJILITY. We've been implementing Microsoft project and portfolio management solutions for over 17 years for large enterprises, including everything from engineering, construction, IT, and new product development. PMOs and CIOs typically come to us when they can't easily explain what's going on across all their projects. They don't know what resources are working on what work, and they have a hard time getting consistent reports and metrics to make project-based decisions. We're known for having a 98% on-time budget track record for successfully implementing these solutions for clients. We offer services and solutions in 3 core areas: deployment and consulting services, PROJILITY's core business. We provide professional services for successfully planning and implementing Microsoft Project Portfolio Management, including Microsoft Project Online, integrating PPM with a line of business applications, and delivering strategic portfolio management solutions to support top-level management planning. We also have a growing Microsoft Power Platform practice where we are actively working with clients to build application workflows and reports to automate their most important business processes. PROJILITY offers a set of pre-built software solutions and accelerators based upon 17 years of experience, including a set of Hammerhead products that provide improved access to your cloud PPM data, accelerate access to visual reports and dashboards using Power BI, connect data between your PPM system and Azure DevOps, Teams, Microsoft Planner, and Active Director to improve visibility, insight, and control over your work, people, and projects. Finally, PROJILITY provides post-implementation support services, including expert care designed to assist your PMO with gaining on-demand expertise on the solution supported. We also offer training for your end users and administrators, and an e-learning offering that can improve consistency and adoption for your users of project management tools. For today's agenda, we're first going to go through some logistics for the day, including how to ask questions and availability of content after the sessions. Our first session is highly requested, one focused on sharing insight into how organizations going down the Agile road can best plan and align those projects and traditional projects run by the PMO. After that, we've got a great client roundtable with speakers from 3 enterprise organizations that have successfully deployed and support Microsoft PM and PPM solutions. We'll then go through an update for the Microsoft Project product roadmap in terms of recent updates to all the core products. We'll wrap up today's presentation by giving you a look into the overall market trends and project management tools marketplace. At the end, we'll provide you with access to useful resources for you and your team, and most importantly, give you the chance to win some cool prizes by completing a short event survey. At the end of each speaking session, we will open the floor to questions and answers. So if you come up with a question, type it in the questions and answers box at the top right side of your screen, where I will read aloud when we open the floor for questions. A recording of today's event will be available and provided in a follow-up email at the end of today's event. Presentations will be available for download by request. I will provide my email at the end of the session, or you can simply respond to my follow-up email. We will be raffling off a few project-specific items, which I will go into more detail about at the end of our event today. In order to enter, you must complete our short survey, which will be sent in a link in our event follow-up email. In our first session, Rob Hirschman from our team will be providing you with a look into how organizations are successfully addressing challenges around aligning different methodologies with their project and DevOps tools. Rob Hirschman, partner here at PROJILITY, has over 20 years experience leading enterprise project and portfolio management strategies and initiatives for large organizations. With a deep background in project portfolio management, business process automation, and enterprise collaboration, Rob leads PROJILITY's business development and client relationship organization, working closely with the firm's delivery team to drive real business outcomes and results for clients. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Annie, and thanks everybody for joining today. As Annie mentioned, we're going to be focused on bridging the worlds of the PMO and PPM solutions with DevOps processes and Agile. To do that, we're going to go through the agenda you see here. We're first going to start with what is the business problem we're seeing from a lot of client organizations? How do we, what is the challenge you're looking to face when you talk about uniting information, data, and processes between these different types of organizations? We'll map out some of the typical challenges we see. We'll walk you through a case study of an organization that's successfully gone down this road. We'll give you a short software demonstration to show you some examples of how this could be done. Obviously, everybody structures their organizations and their processes differently, but this will give you some ideas. We'll talk about steps to get started. If you are thinking about going down the road of bringing these two worlds together, what does that look like? What are the questions you can ask? And finally, we'll give you some planning and deployment guidance. As Annie mentioned, if you would like to log any questions, there is a Q&A manager at the top of the screen here in Teams Live. You can log those questions there. But let's first start addressing the business challenge or the business problems that we see out there today. The first of those, sorry, I went too far, is really we have two different worlds. We've got on the left, we've got the PMO. We've got executives, stakeholders, people that are looking from business value from the solutions they're investing in. And they're the ones that use PPM or PMO types of tools. They want to be able to summarize progress at a portfolio level. So know what kind of value they're getting from their investments, what's the progress of those investments, what are the resources working on those investments, and importantly, when are we going to get delivered things that we've been committing to on the business side? On the right side, you have the Agile teams that are working mainly in a software development environment, and these are ones that are actually developing the software that goes into these offerings and these products. They are tracking work at different levels. They are thinking about delivering time to market. They're thinking about continuous improvement. They're thinking about bringing the next iteration of a product or a solution to market. And they think in a very different set of language and milestones. So when we think about it, at the end of the day, we want what's in the green from a business perspective. We want to build a very strong offering. We want to do it quickly. We want to do it in a way where we can iterate on that over time so we can get quickly to market and then grow that functionality over time. We want to use this to gain market share and make more money for the organization, or if we're in the government, become more efficient or effective or better value for our stakeholders and our constituents. We want to grow revenue in a lot of cases, and we also want to reduce the friction when we start thinking about it. So if we look at kind of the detail, we talk about summarizing portfolio level information. Within an Agile world, we're looking at strategic themes and epics and value streams. We're looking at dollars and ROI, and we're looking at execution level, what's actually getting done. And on the right side, Agile teams are thinking in terms of programs, products, features, user stories, and release trains. So you can see there's an immediate challenge because we all want the same thing, but we're tracking different kinds of information. And so, one of the key challenges we found when we're working with clients in both strong PMOs and Agile organizations is just the first challenges is the difference in the language between organizations. We think about first and foremost, there's a different vocabulary being used by both organizations. PMOs typically talk in terms of goals, outcomes, and initiatives, just like DevOps teams do. But PMOs are typically more focused on the portfolio initiatives. They're more focused on discrete projects and programs that lead to these outcomes. They speak in terms of tasks and activities, deliverables and milestones, and they're often referencing things like resource burn rates, cost and utilization, driving to on time, on budget, in scope delivery of projects that lead to these outcomes. That is traditional PMO. If we think about Agile organizations, they're really talking in terms of user stories. They're looking in terms of products and iterations and features delivered in a series of epics and in a very product-centric way versus a project-centric way. So it's really a different language. Work in an Agile group is often distributed or taken by teams in a very fluid manner off of their Kanban or their Scrum boards, inserted into 2-week sprints of activities where they're working towards building working software or updating working software through different iterations. Your Scrum Masters and the Agile practitioners are talking about cycle times and burn downs. So, one of the initial key challenges we see is really aligning the language between these different groups, which can often be fundamentally different. And when you start thinking about this, it's very easy to understand how difficult it can be to just click integrate my PPM and my DevOps system and the processes behind it. Really until you've come up with a really good translation between the two that is meaningful, where work means the same thing, where you've got harmony between those, it's very, very difficult. So what we found is successful organizations really realize the strength is in finding a common end state and working in a way that everybody works together. The PMO at the end of the day needs that information to make portfolio level investment decisions, ensure consistent monitoring and controlling of projects, that's in place and being managed. Agile teams should also have a consistent expectation set by management in terms of how they are delivering and the progress they're making as well. So we think about it, we've got these different challenges, and that's what starts to lead to some of the challenges, but also the opportunities here. So from here, we start looking more deeply into the technical challenges of integrating these two processes. On the left, we've got the PMO and your traditional PPM, which we talk in terms of things like portfolios and programs. We have discrete projects that have a series of tasks, resources, and assignments. On the right side, we have developer operations, or it's called DevOps. They are thinking in terms of delivering products in a series of epics, which have different features that are going through different release cycles or release trains. There are user stories that are being defined, that are being built towards, that are inserted into different sprints. And then you've got teams that are assigned to different activities. And one of the other key differences is really when we start to think about it, Agile projects often are continuous improvement projects for a product or service offering. And that really differentiates them from a waterfall project where you have a discrete start and end date, you've got a finished product, and you're delivering that to market. So PPM counterparts, projects don't often have epics and features, they're much more waterfall in nature. So if we start thinking about it, when we look at the left in our PPM world, it's often about mapping the data in a useful way where there's actual consistency. And a lot of clients we work with have this challenge because on the left, in your PPM world, you've got work. You've got a resource working on a project. They've got a series of activities that are called assignments, and they've got certain hours they're assigned. And these are things you're tracking in your PPM environment. On the right, you've got activities as well, tasks that are rolling up to user stories, and they're moving from a started to an in progress to a done state, and they're being inserted in a different series of sprints. So I have to start thinking about certain questions. The first question is, how am I capturing hours and work performed in my PPM system on the left to support any kind of resource forecasting and planning, which is really a core strength of a PPM solution and a PMO. On waterfall projects, it's very, very straightforward. We're forecasting duration or hours at a task level. In an Agile project, it's a little bit different. We don't necessarily forecast hours. We sometimes have a challenge forecasting dates because things are always moving and moving into different cycles and different sprints. And at what level are we doing that? We have a lot of inconsistency there. Are we doing everything consistently at a feature and an epic level, rolls up to a product, or is the epic the product? And then we've got features and user stories below it. So really starting to think through what that hierarchy looks like is really, really important and how you want to structure it on both sides of it. We also can start looking into how the hours are going to be broken down and assigned for resources on Agile projects, and how that aligns with your non-Agile or waterfall work, the people performing across the portfolio. This is where you really need to start thinking about the expectations and setting the expectations about how time is accounted for to support both actuals collection, which is time, and forecasting, which is availability. In a perfect world, on the Agile side, developers are working 100% on Agile products and products. But in the real world, that's not what's really happening. Developers are often split across Agile projects, administrative, keep the lights on, maintenance, or business as usual work. So assigning resources to different projects on the left side and having a gap on the right side, you have to really start thinking about how are you going to forecast the hours for resources? Are you going to do team or individual assignments? You have to, second bullet down, agree on the expectations for work hours. Are we starting at 40? Are we doing 37? Are we doing 410? How are we doing that? And do that consistently, and we can use that to forecast. So we really want to start thinking about how we want to set up the expectations of time and progressing. And just kind of moving that to the next level, we have a couple of different options here. Option one, which has become really, really popular with a lot of clients, is to put a process in place that says, hey, all hours, regardless of project type, are going to go into our PPM system on the left. That's our system of record for time. Waterfall projects would have tasks that roll up to phases and milestones. Agile projects will be tracked at a product, epic, or feature level, but no lower than that. In fact, we don't want that managed there. We want to keep that fluidity of the Agile projects happening on the right, not impact the delivery, but still account for time on the left. And that's really, really important if you're going to do any kind of resource forecasting or planning. Option two takes that to a more granular level, where you're forecasting a specific number of hours for a resource planned on work on a product, epic, or feature when it will occur. Now, you're not only saying how many hours are there, but how many hours and when is the work going to be done? And that when is a really, really big question because, again, in the Agile world, we don't necessarily always know when because we're putting things into different release trains and sprints and iterations. It's important to really note that some DevOps or Agile practitioners will tell you that they don't want their developers doing what we call double entry in two places, that it's going to frustrate a lot of developers. Well, we can share that in our experience, there's a true difference between statusing an activity, I did a certain number of hours on a task. I did 24 hours on a feature or a task, or I've moved it, from started to in progress, and how many hours I've worked on a specific thing. One is about statusing the work. I've progressed the work. The other one is about time and resource accounting or cost accounting. So we've had clients that tried to bolt on time tracking to a DevOps environment, and it leads to lots more challenges downstream because DevOps systems aren't scheduling tools. They don't have scheduling capabilities like a project management system, like a Project Online or a Microsoft project. They have a really hard time forecasting forward work because they don't have any resource capacity planning capabilities as well, which is really the whole point of this exercise. In the PMO world, we really want to do cost, resource, and delivery forecasting and accounting for that, and let the Agile teams continue to work at a high rate of velocity. So the key here that we found is to separate out work progress from completion status on activities. Then you don't have double entry. You have a common understanding. The goal is to get the data into one place to support your resource utilization and planning, but get your work done on the right from an Agile world. So just to walk you through it, we thought we'd walk you through a case study of a client of ours that has been fairly successful in doing this. They're a large retailer, and the business scenario is they adopted Agile for development, for most of their development and some of their non-development projects. They had deployed Azure DevOps for their development teams, and they were managing all their features and iterations and sprints and user stories. Then they implemented Project Online for portfolio, resource, and project management, a pretty typical use case. The integration flow they were looking for was in the beginning, they wanted PPM projects to begin in PPM where they do their initiation. So they would all start in Project Online. And then once those projects gained approval, whether they went the Agile or the Waterfall route, there would be a request like any other. It would then go and then create the project in DevOps. So you had a one-to-one match between the two. Then all the updates would be coming the other way. At this point, the work would be planned and performed, not relying on someone on the PPM side, more relying on someone on the DevOps side on the right. So Agile elements are created. A certain level of detail would flow back into PPM with activities, progress, dates, and a summary of resource work, which is a little harder to do because you really don't have assigned resources over there at the right level of planning. Also, as progress was tracked, percent complete or Agile percent complete, as we call it in the PPM world, those updates would flow back into the PPM schedule to progress that so we could at least see how far along in the work they believed they were. So at the end of the day, timesheets were being done by resources in the PPM system. So again, we're separating out progress for the work from the actual hours performed. So at the end of the day, there was a solution in place that the developers would update the progress. They would track those activities in DevOps. The Scrum Masters would control all their activities, plan their sprints and iterations in DevOps. None of that changed. The PMO would have top-level control in PPM from a high-level schedule, so they had that visibility. At a feature level, developers would update work on a weekly basis going into a timesheet. Nobody loves a timesheet, but you got to do one anyway. And then managers would be able to do the resource planning in PPM, understanding there's a different level of granularity between different types of projects. The future state and where these folks are headed is driving more automation around the project and feature creation, starting to do some kind of resource assignment in order to save a step to see if we can actually start aligning teams and people between the two systems. That's a little trickier, but that's where this is headed. So that gives you an example of a case study of an organization that's moved down this road. What I wanted to do is show you some examples of this in a demo system to show you what might be possible. I'm going to go into Project Online. I'm in Project Web App, which most people are pretty familiar with, our web-based user interface, our dashboard. I'm first going to go into the overall project pipeline. This is where I can see lots of different projects. In this case, I'm going to get a view of just my Agile projects. So I may have a portfolio view that rolls up different projects into different groupings. In this case, I'm just looking at 3 Agile projects I have. The information I'm capturing on Agile projects is pretty consistent with what we might have in a standard portfolio. We've got a project name. We've got a department that's delivering it. We may have return on investment metrics. We're measuring, hey, what kind of value, whether it's cost savings, revenue recognition, we're seeing from that. We can measure that in our PPM system. So the results of the project, what's the health of the project? And then we can start to see things like the start and finish date, forecasted start and finish. Because keep in mind, it's going to be going continuous improvement in a series of ongoing sprints. We can see how much work is associated with it, the underlying hours, which is one of the key purposes in our PPM system of having Agile projects. The cost, we want to capture the cost, potentially the benefit. If we're spending $1 million, but we're getting $3 million of value, we want to be able to show that. So management, PMO, and business leaders can come in and see that here, not have to worry about all the detail behind the scenes. We can also start mapping it over to things like strategic themes. So why are we doing this project? We're going to, improve procurement. We're going to improve online revenue. We're going to, again, impact procurement, and also organizational pillars, which are core Agile terms. Maybe we're doing this for ERP rationalization or improved user experience. We have different project types. Just like we have in all of PPM, we may have a waterfall and an Agile project. And we can create things like risk ratings depending on the number of risks that are associated with a specific project, as well as associated with a product if we want to, as well as a portfolio, a program, see the project state, all the typical information. Again, what kind of benefits are we going to see? Customer employee retention, operational improvements. Is it part of a program? So again, really the purpose is to get this in to do that portfolio level planning. And once we get into the details of one of these projects, we can click on that. We would get a different level of detail. So a traditional waterfall project would have, 50 to 500 tasks or activities in it. In an agile project, again, we're really concerned about features and nothing below that. So in this case, on this project, we have an epic. We've got 3 features. We've got a rate module, we've got a skills module, and a materials module. And we can see, clicked one step before that. Back into this. We can see exactly what activities are going on, but how many hours are associated, what is the duration, and what is the flow? How much work has been performed, and how much more work do we have remaining? And the order of these activities is completely up to you, your project manager, the PMO, and the Scrum Master to work together on. But just like any project in PPM, we not only have a schedule, we can set up different indicators here that may be unique to Agile projects. We've got project metadata or information, all the killer information we want to capture up front about the product, the cost, the benefits, the portfolio name. Then we have a project site. So we always have the ability to capture the core project management information in our project online system. Now, when we're setting up this project, what is that going to look like in project? Well, it's going to be a lot simpler than a standard project. So now we're in the desktop tool, Project Professional. We're setting this up at a product level or a project, and then we've got an epic, which is the highest level we've got here. Within that epic, we've got features, rate module, skills module, material module. If you looked over in your DevOps system, you would have the same features. You'd want some kind of a one-to-one match. And then below that in Azure DevOps, you are going to have user stories, tasks and activities, and those are all going to be inserted to different sprints that roll up to iterations. But for PPM purposes, this is what I care about. I care about the epic it's a part of, so I can report off it. I care about the feature. I care about DevOps % complete. I really care about work and potentially remaining work, understanding that those are going to be flexible and malleable in an Agile project. We're going to look at duration, which again is going to kind of depend. We're going to look at cost. And this is where we can start to associate different resources with different projects. So you can see on the rate module, I've got 9 or 10 people working on it. I'm also spending materials, travel, labor, and expenses. I've got other types of costs that are not just people that are associated with this specific activity. But this is really the lowest level you want to be tracking in an Agile project that we've seen. You could go down to a lower level, but it doesn't really necessarily add a lot of value because it's always going to be changing at a level below this. And that really helps us from a DevOps perspective. And also on the PPM side, we can roll that up. We can start to look at different kinds of reports now. So maybe we can go into Power BI. We can pick a dashboard we have. This dashboard is going to give us a portfolio summary from maybe if we wanted to have, what are the Agile projects within different programs? I may click on the modernization program, and within that, I can see there are 3 projects, and they're all Agile or continuous improvement projects here. At a management level, I can see these, and I can say, well, which one is in the red right now? And that's going to drill me down just to the project that is the accounting module, or maybe the one in the yellow. Again, continuous improvement, or maybe it's this one here. Maybe it's our ERP. So we're using the same concepts we have in PPM, but applying it into more of a DevOps environment, so we can do portfolio level reporting. Can also get a timeline, which can be useful. Again, understanding delivery of different milestones is all going to depend on what's happening on the development side. But importantly, we can start looking at 2 key elements. We find these to be really critical to most organizations. The first one is resource availability. And this is going to show us for different roles on the Agile projects, what is their assigned work and what is their overall availability. So we can see if there are any gaps or shortfalls. Then we can look at the people that play those roles and say, okay, where do I have gaps or opportunity areas for these people? What we can do is turn this into a work backlog report. And this is going to show us our planned versus remaining work by resource. What's the backlog for the people that are working just on Agile projects? And then we can roll that up and start to look across all of our projects as well. So in this case for John, he's working on the ERP project. He's working on the rate and the skill module, and I can see how many hours are planned and remaining and a total. So I can start to see where I am against the forecast for John versus someone like Jan or Jonas, who's working on 1 or multiple projects, the activities associated with them, again, at that feature level. So as long as we can build it, we can track it at that level. And that's really what becomes very, very useful in these Power BI reports. A second set of reports may be product level. So maybe we want to think a little higher level. We want to start saying, okay, for each product we have, we're building out or modifying, what are the specific projects that are a part of that. We can pick one of those or multiple products. We can start to see the projects that are within them, or we can start looking at things like strategic pillars to show me every project that aligns with ERP rationalization. And now an executive or a manager can get in and look at the Agile projects, the Waterfall projects, all in one place, drill directly into those right from here. And it's a really nice way to use Power BI to aggregate your information and pull the data over. From a resource perspective, this is where we can use the resource center. And this is a really, really useful set of views. Most people use this today to manage their workload and their utilization. It's really the same concept. We can go in, take a look at the capacity of a pool of resources. And now, because again, it's all in our PPM system at different levels of detail, we can start seeing it. Do we have periods where we have more work than people or people than work? And as we drill down to the actual people, we're going to see for someone like Erwin, he's assigned to maintenance work. This project, and this project. Some of those may be Agile, Waterfall, but I'm capturing all the hours. Remember, the purpose is resource forecasting and hours forecasting. So I can see when he is positively or negatively available. So if I need to replace him, take some of his maintenance work and move it over to Josh, I can do that in the months of April, May, and June. I can do proactive resource forecasting. And that's really the benefit of having your Agile projects in your PPM system, is the ability to do this resource and work forecasting for your resources. Without that, you only have a partial picture of what's going on. Okay. And finally, we have a lot of organizations that are going down the road of using Microsoft Teams. Teams is a great aggregating technology. So what we can do, and this is a great way to pull your information together across your Agile and Waterfall projects, we can have a project like the Health Assessment Development Project here. We can have a general tab, which has all the basic project management information. But when we go to the DevOps tab here, you can see we've got different tabs here. So on the DevOps side, maybe the folks who are actually involved in the development want to take a look at the different features and look at a feature board and maybe update some of their features. They can do that right here through Teams. Or you can look at today's storyboard. What are all the user stories that my team is supposed to be addressing today? And I can move them into the different states of a backlog. I can look at a sprint status. Maybe I want to get from an Agile, I'm a practitioner, and I want to get a report that shows me from my DevOps system, where are we on a certain sprint? What's our capacity? How far along are we towards our sprint goal? This is the kind of data, things like cycle times and backlog times, you're getting from your DevOps system. You're displaying it through Microsoft Teams, or we can even do a DevOps status here and do it at a higher level. So we have some great ways we can use a tool like Power BI to aggregate this information and start to get the information we need on development status. Then what we can do is we can get the PMO schedule. So this is what's going to aggregate it up. Now we're into the PPM system, look at, okay, what's the progress on the PMO side? What are the resources? By the way, if I'm a developer, maybe I just click here and now I can go into my timesheet and I can update my timesheet. To the end user, they're still in Teams. But at the end of the day, they're able to come in here and allocate time to the rate module or the cost module here. How many hours did you spend? You progress your features. You're doing it all in one place thanks to the Microsoft platform. We always have the ability to roll this up to a higher level to the documents that are on a project. We have the document library there. Again, on the PPM side, we may have traditional waterfall projects like this. On the Agile side, some of this may be in DevOps. Or we want to look at things like issues and risks, and we have change control going on or status. Again, we can view all this through Microsoft Teams. So there's a really great unified way to do this using DevOps projects, some basic business process alignment, potentially some integration at the right levels, and then Microsoft Teams, and then Power BI to wrap it all together. So, the next question is, how do you get going? You've got these environments, you're growing your DevOps capabilities, Agile is taking hold in the organization, you're doing a lot of kind of blended waterfall, Agile projects, Scrumfall. How do we get started? Well, one of the first questions you want to ask is, where does intake occur today? Where is it going to occur for all of your projects? And how does a project initiate? If you've got that process down and you've already got that built out, then that's going to answer one of the key questions, and that's going to drive you to what a potential solution looks like. Also, what is the definition of a project? In traditional PMI, project management language, it's very, very straightforward. In a DevOps world, is a project, how are we defining it? Is it a product? Is it a series of activities within a product? Is it part of an epic? Where does a project fit in here? And if it doesn't fit, we need a way to map the two so we have some kind of common language and some consistency. We've seen some organizations kind of hand the DevOps organization over to the developers and say, okay, go. And then you've got 4 different templates, 5 different ways to track stuff. You really want to come up with a strategy for how you're going to roll out DevOps, what that looks like, so you have some consistency, so you can then map information back in an appropriate way. A really big question we find a lot of clients are asking is, what is it we're really looking to measure? Is it cycle time? Is it throughput? Is it resource utilization? Is it spend? Is it value? That's really going to drive how you're going to use these systems, how you're going to set them up, how you're going to configure them. And then kind of calling back to the previous one, are your DevOps, on the DevOps side components, are they consistently applied and tracked? We went into one organization, they had 4 instances of Jira, 1 of Azure DevOps, and then they wanted to integrate that with one PPM system. Really hard to do when the stuff on the DevOps side isn't even consistent there. So it's really about getting some kind of consistency so you can apply and track it in a managed, measured way. And we're talking about defining products, epics, features, user stories, work items, who puts things into different sprints and activities. A really, really big question here is time tracking and time sheeting. Is that important? Why is it important? And when will it be implemented? This is often a driver. A lot of the DevOps PPM integration we see is getting good, accurate information on the time people are spending on different activities to roll up to that resource allocation and forecasting. Do we need to do resource capacity planning? 95% of the organizations we work with on the PMO side, they say absolutely yes. This is our number 1 or number 2 big challenge. Is that something you need to do? And you start thinking about, well, half or 3/4 of my work on the dev side is over there. How do I bridge these worlds? It just takes a little bit of planning and some time to work together. And just remember, you hear a lot from the DevOps side, Scrum Masters, hey, I don't want my people doing double entry. It's not double entry if the data is different. If I'm asking you to go to a timesheet and put in hours worked on a project versus going in and progressing activities, it's not the same data at all. And coming up with some magic formula to extract one into the other is often challenging. Keep it simple, track at the right levels, do some basic data integration, and move on. From a cost accounting perspective, I want to know how much time my people spend on a project or a product. From a work product progress perspective, how far along are we, and when will we see value from these investments? That's really important. You always want to ask, what's the technical environment? Are we on-prem? Are we in the cloud? Do we have some kind of a hybrid? Is everything in Office 365 today? Do we have access to a data mart or a data warehouse? And what's the maturity of the organization? How mature are we on the PPM and the PMO side? How mature are we on the DevOps side? Are we ready for something like systems integration? A lot of clients will say, absolutely, let's go. Other ones like, we're kind of still waiting in and figuring out what we're going to do on DevOps. Probably not the right time to get going. And remember, do you have good data in process? This is often one of the biggest challenges we see from a lot of organizations. Is good data coming in? Do you have a good process for reviewing that data? Are you able to make good decisions off that data? If you're not fully confident or have some level of confidence in the data, then it's going to be really hard to do any kind of system or data integration. And then again, at the end of the day, we want a well-aligned state between our DevOps world and our project or our PPM world. So thinking through some ways you can be successful with this, organizations we find that are successful, they standardize on how DevOps is used. They use consistent processes, templates, and tools in DevOps. They establish these and have written policies around it. Without this, you can't do any kind of real integration. They define dates. This is really important. It may seem just obnoxiously simple, but how are we defining the beginning and the end of the work? Is it the earliest sprint start when the user story is inserted in there? Is it the end of the latest finish date? What are we looking at so we can then forecast when things are going to start and end in our PPM environment at a loose leaf level? So how do we do forecasting? We again want to separate out, and we've probably hit this a couple times, the work progress on our Agile projects from the hours worked in our PPM environment. In an Agile world, we're thinking DevOps % complete on the task, the epic, or the feature. In PPM, we're talking about hours at a feature or an epic level, depending on what you want to report on and how you need to allocate time and capitalize that. And what we want to do is meet the needs of both the PMO and the DevOps or the Agile teams, just like we talked about in the beginning, so everybody can work how they want to work, but you have the information you need to make really good business decisions. So when you think about the actual integration between these, think about it at the right level. A project in PPM maps to a product or a project at an epic level over in DevOps, right? That's a good logical way to think about it. Below that, you have activities. An activity may be a feature, and that comes over, and again, it's a feature and project, and we can track at that level. That's the simplest, most direct way to do it. We have a lot of organizations that have gone down the user story level, and it gets very, very complicated because it's always changing, right? We don't really care about that level of detail in PPM. So again, recommend tracking no level lower than the feature level, and create a really meaningful hierarchy to support any kind of reporting you're looking for. So hopefully this gave you a good introduction into the world of how to bridge your DevOps and your PPM and your PMO environment. At this point, we're going to jump into any questions. Annie, I don't know if we have any questions in the Q&A manager up at the top.
No questions just yet, Rob.
Okay, we'll give it another minute here.
We'll speak now or forever hold your peace. Thank you for that presentation, Rob. For the next part of today's conference, we'll be giving you the opportunity to ask your toughest questions of some of our clients that have successfully deployed and drive adoption of Microsoft Project and PPM technologies. We're honored to be joined by experts from 3 organizations. First is BD, also known as Becton Dickinson, is an American multinational medical technology company that manufactures and sells medical devices, instrument systems, and reagents. Most recently, you may know them for their COVID-19 rapid antigen tests they developed. We're also joined by Travis County, Texas, Texas' 5th most populated county, which is located in South Central Texas outside Austin. Finally, we've got a familiar name for those who have attended previous conferences, the state of North Dakota. As a matter of process, we're going to allow each leader to do a short introduction of themselves, tell you about their experience with PPM and project, and then we'll move on to allowing you to ask questions by inserting them in the IM questions and answers window in Teams. Each of our speakers will be sharing their insights into how they successfully plan for and drove adoption and implementation of Microsoft project-based solutions. First, we'll have Cheryl Abel from BD introduce herself. Cheryl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Annie. Hello, everyone. So much of my time is spent assisting users or adding new users to our environment, updating training content, and managing data within the Microsoft Project Server environment. So there are various usage approaches of Microsoft Project used within BD IDS, and it really depends on new product development or product lifecycle management. And recently, in the past 2 years, with the introduction of DevOps being more heavily used within engineering, we went from a more engineering-focused usage of detailed schedules in Microsoft Project to our PMO organization being the primary user of Microsoft Project. And with that change, our PMO has finally grown to have a few project schedulers who assist the project managers with scheduling and health checks and overall support. So our usage of Microsoft Project has varied over the years, and with that comes all types of changes. But one of the things that I have personally appreciated along the way is PROJILITY has helped us migrate as well as provide some support. That way, I'm not always getting in the weeds of details I don't know, and Robin and his group come to our rescue. So thank you.
Okay, my name is Ernest Tevis, and I'm the PMO director for Travis County. And thank you for the wonderful introduction earlier. I do appreciate it. I've been with Travis County now for 1 year. Next month, I have around 20 years in project management, and I've been in PMO management now for about 10 years. When I came to Travis County a year ago, they did not have a PPM tool. They had very little visibility into what was in the portfolio because everything was manual. They had a very loose intake process. As I like to call it, they were a group of order takers. So they didn't control what was coming in, and they certainly didn't align what came into the PMO to the vision or the strategic vision of the organization. So in the past year, we've formed, hired, and set up a intake team. So we have an official intake process now. And then after we did that, we implemented in the new PPM tool, which is Microsoft Project. The development team here at Travis County was already using DevOps, which was, in my opinion, a leg up for us because I am a fan of DevOps. So we have implemented the PPM tool now with the help of PROJILITY. We have set up some very good reports, which we are in the process of modifying to work better for us. And we're now working on our phase 2 of our PPM implementation, which is integration to DevOps. So thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. Finally, we have our good friend Justin. Don't call it information, that's just confusing. Data from the great state of North Dakota joining us. Justin?
Hi, thank you. Pleasure to be here. My name is Justin Data. Data is a real name. And for those who haven't heard the joke, my wife's name is actually Tara. So there's a real person out there in the world called Tara Data. Anyway, I've been in project management for about 24 years, have my PMP and all that good stuff that goes with being a project manager. Close to 17 years, I've been at the state of North Dakota, which is based in Bismarck, ND. And just a fun fact I looked up is that Travis County actually has 500,000 more people than the entire state of North Dakota. So it's a very rural state that borders Canada, not to be confused with South Dakota. I've been heading up the IT department's project office here at the state of North Dakota for about 7 years. My entire 17 years ever has been in that project office, starting as a project manager. And prior to that life, I worked in publishing, finance, and some other consulting before the government gig. And the way it works here, so we do have a project office. That project office has about 17 project managers and 6 or 7 contractors, depending on the year. And it reports to something called the Chief Customer Success Office or Officer, which is kind of the customer-focused area of the IT shop, and that reports directly to the CIO, who is part of the governor's cabinet. And just so you can see in the picture below that I do run outside all year in ND. It gets very cold and sometimes there's a lot of snow. Anyway, as it relates to the real topic here, which is Microsoft Project and Project Online, we stood up our instance of Project Online in 2018, in the summer of 2018, with PROJILITY, and very happy to have that up when COVID hit, because it really kind of saved our bacon that we had a portfolio process that we kind of got in order by the time that the federal government dumped millions upon millions of dollars on state governments to go help combat the pandemic through the copious use of new technologies. So luckily, within that 6-month or 8-month time between us standing this up and having that event, we were able to establish some of the processes, like everyone has mentioned here already, and have a decent intake, have a decent portfolio view, and we're able to quickly use that to create new portfolio views of COVID and CARES Act related work. So since then, life is normalizing, and we're continuing to use it to have a very nice transparent view into all of the major IT projects in the state of North Dakota, which is $500,000 and up. We publish that publicly, and we also have more detailed views that we use within the office to manage even more projects. And I'm excited to hear everyone talk about all the Azure DevOps stuff, if you will, today, because that's maybe our next journey, is to start working on some of those integrations. So that's me, and thanks for having me.
Cheryl, Ernest, and Justin, thank you for sharing your intros and experience with Project with us today. If all attendees would like to add your questions to the IM questions and answers window now in Teams, we'll start taking those and allowing our panel to share their feedback and direction. Rob, do we have any questions in the queue?
We do. So we actually asked a couple of folks to send some questions beforehand. So the first one that came over, maybe we'll start with you, Cheryl. What was the biggest challenge you faced after your first system was deployed, and how did you address it?
Thank you, Ronald. That's a good question. So Probably the biggest challenge was adoption, and that was largely driven by expectations. So upper level management support drove that, and there were different compliance checks, or just kind of when a director or VP is going into project schedules to inspect what they're expecting, that really drove behavior. So that was it. Everyone realized then it was something that was needed and was expected, and then along the way just formed those better practices. But I think adoption, even along the way, it's changed. It changes as you onboard or offboard people. You get new PMs in, you get new upper level management in, and that dynamic changes along the way. But if the organization's expecting a certain amount of planning to occur, and then following up with recognizing the importance of that and using that data, I think that goes a long way.
That's great. Thanks, Cheryl. How about you, Ernest? I know you did this pretty recently.
Right, and I would say right now we're having our share of struggles, right? And user adoption is always at the top of the list, right? Trying to get people to participate, not the PMO, right? I'm not worried about PMs. I can usually manage that and get my team to participate. What I'm seeing adoption issues with is time tracking, and the system is only as good as the data that we have within the system. And if you don't get people to participate and enter their timesheets, then it makes it very difficult for you to use the system as designed, which is to forecast. So from that perspective, we're having our struggles there. We do have the full support of our executive leadership, from our county executive down to the CIO to myself. So I think that's an obstacle that we will overcome. We're still very new in the implementation, as we just went live in March. So it's just a matter of retraining people how to do it, and making sure they understand that we're not here to make their life difficult, right? I'm not here to give you extra work. I'm trying to help you, show me what you have on your plate so I can get you some assistance, because I go to county leadership consistently and tell them we're overworked, and it's all anecdotal. If you don't enter your timesheet, then I can't give them empirical evidence to prove what I'm saying. So that's one thing. I would say the second thing is when you're setting the system up, you don't know what you don't know. And while this isn't my first time to implement Microsoft Project as a PPM project server, in fact, it's my third time to implement it. We don't know. I don't know the unique things that go on here in the county. So what I mean by that is, when we set it up, I have an idea of how I want it to work, but then I also need to have reports that are useful. And so as we're working through this process, we're finding that we have to go back and modify reports so that they can give us better information. And this is an iterative process. And I like to tell my team, we have to progressively elaborate to make this work. And so we're finding that we're going in and tweaking reports so that we can provide better data to our leaders as they ask for it. So that would probably be the second thing that I would say.
Thanks, Ernest. Justin, you're about 2.5 years in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, really a lot of the same similar experiences. I mean, definitely, getting the buy-in for people to interact with the system appropriately outside of the project office has been tough. I mean, and when I say tough, it means that I was surprised at how much additional work it takes on our end. So, for example, everyone who's in the project office, we have some control as to how they use the system. We've mandated it as a department that you have to use it, because that's how we get all of our, all of the tracking of all of our project work from the group is by using that system. Our CIO has aspirations that he wants more of that kind of visibility on projects all across the state in general, and most importantly at the IT shop. So getting that is much more difficult, because you've got we're also going through an Agile transformation, so there's a lot of newly forming Scrum teams who are using Azure DevOps. So it's a kind of a conflicting tool set without having, because we don't have the integration into that yet. And so we've developed certain things like a light project management framework that we're starting now to roll out that people could use who aren't part of a Scrum team. Well, everybody agrees that they want to do this and they shake their heads and great idea, let's go do it. But then when it comes time to actually have them start entering their projects, it's you flip the light on and the cockroaches scatter. Nobody wants to do it, right? Because it's much more, it takes time. So what I found is it also means it takes more time out of management in the project office to go enforce some of those rules or be more persuasive and do the change management, organizational change activities that you need to do to get people to buy into that. And another challenge, I would say that getting the resource management to work is a lot more work than we had anticipated, but we've made some of our own problems because we have a few different time systems and a couple of legacy systems that are just we're waiting for them to go away or to be migrated into something else. So we're hesitant to launch another method of time tracking on top of those other systems. So that's an internal complication, but on top of that, I can see that it's a big culture change, at least for us. So I think when we get to that point, that's going to be something we have to face and put a lot of extra effort into. And then the other thing, I'll just give one more thing, is that it does take time. As project managers, we're often assigned to make a project happen, and we've got a team, and we're kind of, pushing that team forward and making sure they deliver. Have you delivered this? This is due, that's due, follow up, issues, risks. It's a whole other world when you are the person who has to deliver everything. And you've got your team of a few project managers assigned to it. So I found that we really had to carve out that time for the team and take care of, whatever backlog that created on other projects in order for us to actually deliver the initial implementation of this. So that was a big lesson.
Yeah,
and those are, that'll cover it for me.
Yeah, well, building on that, Cheryl, so what metrics and KPIs would you recommend to track and measure and demonstrate adoption and progress of the system?
So early on, when engineering was the heavier user of the project schedules and time tracking, the metrics that we used were primarily around compliance with time entry. We still do that today because we want to maintain a certain level of compliance. So a report goes out when people are less than like 95% compliant. However, we have groups that require 100%, like in other countries, because that data is used differently. So that's probably one of our metrics around time tracking. For project schedule health, we have a report that's generated that can be viewed, when was the last health check run on the project file, and what the scoring was. So it's just an indication. It's kind of like that check engine light. It's not telling you if it's a good plan. It's telling you if the best practices are applied. So it allows, if you see something, you can at least go dig a little more in a different way. And as far as KPIs, we don't get into tracking that within Project Server. We've tried in the past, and it's right now used in another format in a PowerPoint deck that the KPIs are kind of rolled up at that level. So we don't get into that higher level analytics within Project Server at this point.
Got it. Thanks, Cheryl. How about you, Ernest? Any thoughts on KPIs and metrics for adoption?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of Power BI. I think it's a great reporting tool that we have. And so there are multiple things that I look at as a PMO director, and one is time, right? I think that was just mentioned. It's a good indicator as to whether or not people are using the system, and it's one of the key things that we needed from the system. It was a key deliverable. So time is a big thing. One of the things that we have done here is that, we're a large user of contract resources. So we've now implemented the policy that you get paid based on the time that you're entering in the tool. And if you're not entering your time here, you're not getting paid, and neither is your company. So that's driven great adoption from that segment of the IT staff. Another thing that we look at are your project milestones. And if you're hitting those project milestones as projected, and how far off you are, how far on you are, if you're actually sandbagging your project and coming in early, that's something that we're looking for. Also, we're looking at how many times you have to baseline your project based on change requests, and you're shifting the dates. We require that if the date shifts, right, and your project goes red, you have to file a change request to change your date, because you're not going to be able to hit that date now and make the new date. And so that's another thing that we're looking at, trying to understand from a analytics perspective what that means, so that in the future we get better at projecting projects. I think one of the mantras that was beat into me as a young project manager when I started my career is what gets measured gets done. So we're trying to make sure that when we're measuring something, we're doing the best job that we can, and we understand, well, last time we did a project similar to this, we said it was going to happen in 12 months and it was really 24, and this is why. So we need to look at that when we kick this new project off that's similar. So.
Great. Justin?
All right,
Justin's
sorry, mute button issues there.
No problem.
Somebody had to do it, so yeah. So things I would look at as far as, are people using the system well? The one thing is the number of projects, right? So we started off with around 40 some projects, and now we have 130 some that are active in the system. So we've been able to see that grow over time, and hopefully we could figure out some trends at some point to see like what is the actual standard that we should have in here. As far as making sure that schedules are getting updated like we expect, so we want to make sure that people are updating their information on a regular time frame. We have a little sneak alert and spreadsheet where we can expose when the project schedule was published, right? And that's available to everyone in the system. So that's a good way to take a look at, are people actually publishing their schedules and making those updates? And along with that, this probably ties into the last question too, is just that one other challenge that goes in with this reporting is that it was difficult at the onset to make sure that all the data was entered the right way, that we were getting the actual calculations, for example, variance that we were required to provide against a baseline cost and schedule, because people were not necessarily updating them on a regular fashion, or they were having their own personal interpretation as to how that information should be entered in the system. So we did hire and also freed up some additional staff time for people that were already on staff to be in charge of that. So there is a person who regularly goes in and makes sure that the data is up to date, that all the fields are entered, that they're entered the right way, and works with the staff to make sure that that's happening. So as far as actual project health goes, what we are mandated to do by state law here in the state of North Dakota is we have to measure our current actuals in a variance model, I guess. So compared to the baseline, we have to continually produce is the baseline for budget and the baseline for schedule within a 20% variance. And we have our little stoplight reports that are change colors based on how that calculation turns out, and that is all based on schedule information that people are updating. And then if it goes red, which is over 20%, then we have different written corrective actions that we have to take on that. So those are the biggest things right there.
Thanks. That's great. So the next question, are organizations considering moving to project online? What are the one or two things you'd recommend we prepare for before our implementation starts? Maybe start with you, Cheryl.
All right, good question. I think one of the things is keep it simple and phase in more later where you can. So one of our migrations, we were coupled in with a corporate office and they were having a real challenge defining it. So they were defining everything and it was going to have great impacts on us. And we just wanted to pick it up and put it down in a new version. But we were, you know, and thankfully we did that, but they really struggled. And that struggle lasted quite a long time. And you don't know what you don't know, which someone mentioned earlier, but at the same time, hone in on those basics that you absolutely want to get from the data and the tool. And just keeping it simple allows you to get the implementation in front of people, which will, those people, your end user group, are going to have some folks that really want to contribute to what it will look like in the future. So some things absolutely you need to define, but do you need to go and define the whole solution at that time? Maybe not. So I would just encourage the keep it simple motto.
That's great. Ernest, I know you did this pretty recently. How about you?
Well, I'll say again, you know, that this isn't the first time that I've implemented. It's the first time that I've implemented the online version, the Azure cloud version. I've done on-prem twice before this, but I think Cheryl just, you know, hit a home run with her response, which is really the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Don't try to overdo it. Don't boil the ocean. Progressive elaboration is the key to success within a PMO, within Microsoft project for sure. I have found in my career that if you give people too much to consume at once, they're not going to consume it and you're going to limit your success. So the trick is giving them enough to consume and enough time to consume it so that they can implement those new changes and those new policies and get comfortable with them, and then proliferate that outside of IT, proliferate that to the other departments, and then pick up that next change. You know, you need to keep in mind that you're never gonna, this isn't a destination that you're going to, right? This is a lifestyle change for your organization. This is something that you have to live every day. And whatever you put in place is something that you're gonna have to live with. So always keep that in the back of your mind before you do something. And I think it's key. It's critical that the PMO directors, the PMO managers set expectations with leadership beforehand. I've been in situations where people think we're implementing this new PPM tool. Life is going to be wonderful. The day that it goes live, everything's going to change and the angels are going to sing in heaven and the sun's going to come out. And that's just not the way it works. You need to make sure that your executives understand it takes between 6 and 9 months before the data within the system is really useful for tracking metrics and giving conclusive data on resource utilization historically and projecting forward. So if you can manage those expectations and make people understand that we're going to implement it, but then I need this time for us to make sure that the culture shifts and people start using it and start adopting these new changes, and then you're going to start seeing useful data. You're going to make your life a lot easier.
Great, Ernest. Thanks. Justin?
I wish the video was on because I would give you guys both a standing ovation right now. That's fantastic. I'm right there with you. Lifestyle change, that is for absolute sure. And it makes me think of, you know, when you're kind of putting the pitch out there to go get this type of system, or, you know, you've been a project manager who's desired it for all these years and finally someone is going to let you get it. It's one of those things where you kind of have to, you know, it's like, be careful what you wish for, especially if you get it, because now you have that lifestyle change. And going from a paper-based status report and individual, you know, project files or Excel files or whatever people are using to an actual portfolio system is a very big transformation. And what it also does, besides exposes all of your data, is it exposes everyone's education level or experience level with utilizing Microsoft Project, right? So you have to be a good project shop, and if you don't, if you're not good at that, if you're not good at using the core foundation of this tool, then that's an education opportunity you need to build into your experience of rolling this out. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I agree 100% with keeping it simple and the progressive elaboration. I mean, we're never going to stop improving on this, and it was not perfect day one. And as soon as you get it to where you think it's perfect today, there's something else you're going to want to improve on for tomorrow. But with that, I'll also say that right in the beginning, executive buy-in is key. So it's a state, we had a different system many years ago, and that system died a miserable death because we did not have the executive buy-in for that portfolio system. So before you get going on it, make sure that the people at the top really want this. You have a good business case for it, and that they're going to support you when you're out there trying to enact this lifestyle change. A couple other things that popped in my head too are, keeping the implementation team a reasonable size. So a smaller size, so you can make some quick decisions and you don't get bogged down in, decision by massive consensus of 30 people. And again, dedicate that staff time of your own and your own project management resources who need to be a part of the project, because you're going to want to hit your own deadlines and roll this out. And it always looks good when the project office delivers a successful project for themselves.
Thanks, Justin. Next question. If you could do your deployment again over, what is the one thing you'd do differently? Maybe start with Cheryl.
That's a really good question. I would say that's probably keeping the implementation team small, but with the one migration that would have helped us. At the beginning of a migration, that when we just started using it, probably having the support group needed to maintain the usage, so that the impact was training, getting users up to speed with Microsoft Project and the nuances of it, and that's endless, right? But we didn't have a really good method of doing that. There were some in-classroom trainings, which is hard to make, it's a time commitment to have the training room, the PCs. Now with everything changing, with more Teams nature presentations, it's much different. But I would just say consider those elements of the deployment, getting your users to adopt it. One of the first things is, do they know how to use it? And then what standards are you expecting? And then having that information available for them in a user-friendly manner. So you've got this application that has a lot of power, but then, it can be dangerous, right? You're just releasing the Krakens and everyone's using the schedule, and you may have all these different approaches. So having some standards that you can teach on or train on initially or have references to is helpful. So we long ago, when someone else was in my role, it was Microsoft Word documents. And when I got into my role, I'm like, I cannot maintain these. It's maddening, right? So I started using SharePoint wiki pages, which it's just one click. They can get to data, kept it to like a one-page focus of information, and then you can embed links into other job aid pages. And it was helpful to do, and it was a lifesaver for me. It documented things so I could reference as well. But considering all those elements of maintaining your user group, even the support of adding users, who's going to be doing that? So defining those items so it's clear and there's kind of a plan for that, I think would be helpful.
Thanks, Cheryl. Ernest, any thoughts on that?
Well, we're still, in what month? 6-ish, so 7. I would say, the one thing that comes to mind for me is I knew, because I've done this before, that the adoption issue was going to be my number one problem. So I had my management write into my team's review, right, their goals this year. They gave each one of our project managers and project coordinators a goal revolving around a utilization and adoption of the tool, and we made that half of the weight of their review. So, because this was a big deal for us this year. I wish that I had reached out to my peers and said, you're going to need to put something in everyone who has to contribute into their goals this year about contributing to time card and timekeeping on this system, because I think that would have helped drive better adoption. But each organization's different, and you need to understand the political ramifications of what that means for you to do something like that. But I think that I would have approached that a little differently if I had it to do over again.
Thanks. Justin?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of a different perspective, because we actually did, right before we put this project online system in at the state, we had put in a different non-Microsoft project system in that we had purchased out of a particular type of state term contract, and it was a very big vendor. It is a competitor to Microsoft. I'm not going to say who it is, but we tried to do the same thing. And one of the biggest things, and we pulled the plug, obviously, because we're using Project Online right now. We pulled the plug and we immediately went to Project and Project Online. And one of the big reasons for that, outside of the, I guess, customer service we were getting from that particular vendor, was it was just a bear to sustain from a what I call it, like an administrative standpoint. We probably would have, I mean, to make it work, we would have had to hire a number of dedicated staff members, and then their role would have been taking care of the care feeding of that system. Now, the good thing about switching to something like Microsoft for us is that we are a Microsoft shop. So we have people who are already on staff to do a lot of the Microsoft and the O365 administration. So we can, as a project office, take on kind of the, customer facing or project manager facing type of administration, and it's not that big of a deal. But this other particular system that we had tried to work with prior, it was just a beast, and it was consuming our entire lives. So that's a little bit of a different perspective, although agree completely with the other comments. Similar stories.
Got it. We got a really good question here in the queue, probably be our final question here. So what was the level of maturity of your PMO ahead of the implementation of the PPM tool? And how did it impact the implementation and the eventual adoption of the tool by your PMs? Maybe start with Cheryl on that.
All right, so our initial implementation did not involve a PMO because we didn't have a PMO. It was engineering. So literally our engineering director, or excuse me, our engineering VP and one of our software engineering leads who had a background of using Microsoft Project kind of floated this usage need because of projects not being on time and really the engineering slips that were taking place. So we were very engineering focused on detailed schedules that were driving, deliverables, and it was so heavy engineering that, project managers, well, they existed. It just there wasn't an organizational dotted line, or kind of like this collaboration wasn't taking place at that point. Now, this was many years ago. But what happened with engineering is there would be deep dive reviews of the project schedules, and the maturity was driven, I would say, by that review, and by really, we had an engineering project review meeting that lasted a half day once a month, and it wouldn't be an odd circumstance for the VP to say, let's go ahead and open the schedule and take a look at it in a meeting, and it was like everyone was on a hot seat. But it drove a different expectation. So within the engineering group, that maturity really increased over time, and our time trackers in engineering, because of our compliance reports, and early on it was one of their goals, setting items that were in for their reviews, they had to be compliant, and just all those things were really driven by engineering. So now our PMO is developing that maturity, and it's a different levels for amongst the PMs. And but it's certainly in a medium state, I would say, for maturity level for our PMs right now.
Thanks, Cheryl. And Ernest, I know you mentioned you're about 6 months post journey right now. You're actually still on the journey, right? But post implementation, any thoughts on this maturity wise?
Well, I think the question was around the maturity of the PMO, really. And Travis County had a PMO prior to my coming on board, and they've had a PMO for 20 years. But on the maturity scale, I would say that this organization was, well, very immature, because their standards and policies were, well, if you want to follow them, well, if you want to use a template. And when I came on board, there were so many projects that out there where you just couldn't measure the health of the project. You couldn't measure the percent complete. We didn't know where they were. And from a maturity perspective, that's not very mature. So I've been looking at this PMO from a very holistic, not just from a PPM perspective view, which is how are things coming in? How do we acquire new projects? Okay, we get the project, what's the process? How do we assess? Is this even a project? Do I want it? I mean, is this something that belongs in the PMO? One of the things you never want to do as a PMO director is say, look, I'll take this as a project, and it's about 30 hours of work, physical work that a technician has to do or somebody, but I'm going to put 65 hours of PMO overhead on top of that. What kind of value are you bringing? So those are the things that we're looking at. And what you're bringing me, number one, will never get approved through security. It's a huge risk, or it's not within our strategic vision as a county. The sheriff's not going to approve that. Why are you bringing this to me, etc. So we're looking at those things now. And then we have now all of these projects that have come in. We have about 60 projects that are in our queue to get executed. We're executing about 40 right now. So how do we rank projects, right? So we weren't ranking projects. We weren't looking at where they fit, where they fit within the spectrum of what needed to get done of importance. So that's the next level of governance that we're bringing on board, and we're doing that. So it's about, you have to look at everything from the life cycle perspective, from the way that it comes in till the day you close it. That the PPM tool that you purchase should be able to manage that entire life cycle. That's one of the reasons that we purchased Microsoft Project. And how your organization is going to implement it, right? How much control and how much authority does the PMO have to make those decisions, and what does governance look like? So, I mean, I could talk for hours on this, and I won't, but it's always more than just the PPM tool.
Absolutely. And Justin, kind of wrapping things up.
Yes. So as far as process, governance, templates, document templates, etc. I think we were pretty mature going into our implementation of the system, right? So, we've had a project office for about 18 years. It came to be because of some legislation that was passed a long time ago. So there are a number of laws and state standards that kind of forced us to have a decent level of maturity when it comes to how we operate as project managers, and we were good about being all on the same page, right? And how we manage our projects. What was missing for us was that tight integration of the portfolio and getting the level of transparency that we really needed, and the ease of having that transparency at our fingertips. So that was very core before we implemented Microsoft Project Online, and that's where we really needed help, and that has helped immensely, right? So again, we publish project information publicly, and the CIO's got the dashboard on his favorites, and he reviews the dashboard of the portfolio with the governor regularly. So it's good stuff. I think from that perspective, it's helped. The actual implementation of the tool has helped advance the maturity of the organization. And I'll also say that implementing that tool, because of our level of maturity and process and standards beforehand, I didn't I think it went easy. I don't think it was difficult, or we didn't have to, you know, do any type of, we did very minimal customizations on our implementation. I think because if you are using project management best practices, if you're, you know, kind of a PMI shop, or you're following a lot of the kind of standard methods of how project management works out there, I mean, what we found is that this is really built to accommodate that, and it was just kind of a natural progression. So.
Great feedback. Annie, I'll hand it back to you. We're wrapping up our panel.
Well, that was just terrific. Thank you to our panel for your feedback and direction, and all our attendees for your great questions. In our next session, we're going to give you an update as to what's new with the core Microsoft project tools and what may be coming next. Rob, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Annie. And thanks again to the panel. You all were outstanding. Really appreciate everybody joining today and asking great questions. So when we talk about what's new with project, we have to talk about different parts of project. You know, we have to talk about project for the web. We have to talk about project desktop, the scheduling tool. We have to talk about project online. And believe it or not, we still have to talk about project server, which is the on-premise version. So, you know, when the product team that builds project actually supports multiple applications now. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with this or not, but if you look at the chart on the left, they really build 4 products. They build at the bottom Planner, and they invented Planner about 5-6 years ago as a lighter touch web-based work management tool, not a project management tool, but a way in Office 365 people could collaborate on work, share tasks and activities, and do it in a very visual, intuitive way. So it's really a task management tool. So number 1, the project team builds Planner. The tool up from that is Project for the Web, and most folks at this point are pretty familiar with this. This is Microsoft's pure web-based light touch project management tool. It's designed for what they call the casual or the business project manager, sometimes called the accidental project manager in industry. And these are folks that don't have a formal project management role, meaning they're not a PMP, they don't sit in an IT PMO, but they're still responsible for managing projects. Maybe they're in marketing or operations or finance, and something like a project online or a project server is too heavy for them. So, you know, Project for the Web is the latest tool from Microsoft, and that's a tool that continues growing. Then they also build and support Project Online, which is Microsoft's full PPM solution, which you've heard a lot about from some of the folks that were on the panel today. So, you know, when we look at it, we look at the multiple tools that are built and supported by this product team. So really starting at Project for the Web, you know, there's a lot of investment in the space because this is new. This is a high growth area. If you think about kind of where the market is right now, there is a high demand for these tools because they really didn't exist before 4 or 5 years ago. So in the current roadmap, you know, the vision the product team has to allow teams to work in a very visual, intuitive way, enterprises get the results they need. If you look at the 3 columns, we have the ship column on the left, and this is what's been built and shipped within the Project for the Web product. The Roadmaps app, which most people are familiar with, getting down to custom fields at a local level, the ability to export projects into Excel. There's a whole list of stuff here in the collaboration area. Then there's some project management enhancements, and these continue to grow and grow as Microsoft gets more feedback, exporting schedules, integrating with Power BI, importing from an MPP file. The ability now, because it is built on the Power Platform, and the data is stored in the Power Platform, to expand that out into multiple environments. Microsoft has released what's called the Project Accelerator. It's an example of what you could do on the Power Platform to build out more of a light PPM application on the back of Project for the Web. You can build custom forms. There's also an API now that you can call to actually have certain actions happen. They recently released some functionality from Project Operations called Bookings to do some basic kind of resource management. What's next up, and this is what's happening kind of in progress right now, one of the big areas of focus is what we call the team member experience. So when Microsoft released this product, the vision was really the key user was going to be the business project manager, right? They never really, or at the time, there was not really a lot of demand for team members on those projects coming in and updating their tasks and activities. Well, what they've learned over the last 2.5 years is there are team members and they want to update their tasks, and project managers, whether they're mature or lightly mature or in the business, they still want updates from team members. So Microsoft has been building that team member experience so team members can update the tasks they're assigned on their projects. And that's a little more complex than it sounds because they're actually building it on top of a platform within Tasks for Teams, so that you'll be able to go to Tasks for Teams and see all of your project tasks along with all of your typical to-do tasks or your planner tasks, everything in one place. So they're actually building it within the Office 365 and the Teams platform. From a project management perspective, they've been updating the project scheduling engine. They've got a lot of feedback that there were some things that needed to be done. Different views and filters, labels and checklists have been released. So they've taken a lot of functionality that was highly used in Planner, and they're bumping it up into Project for the Web. Think of a Project for the Web as a project management, or a much heavier version of Planner that's really focused on project management, much more visual and intuitive. Different link types are coming. Development of critical path functionality, working on some calendar customizations, which are getting ready to release. Also, the ability to import MPP files, and also color coding of different fields. From a collaboration perspective, this is tying tighter into teams. So the ability to do @mentions within your project schedule, chats using Microsoft Teams. Also, they're releasing, and they've just recently released, the ability to allow guest users in to assign and allow them to view different tasks and projects, and also team members to come in and edit tasks. And finally, about 2 months ago, they released support for what's called the GCC, or the Government Community Cloud. So folks like Justin's team and Ernest's team that are in the government cloud didn't have access to this tool for the last 2.5 years. It's now readily available. If we look at the far right, this is kind of what's in the near to midterm horizon. That kind of a my tasks experience versus team members just looking at all the tasks in one place. You can see there's a lot of investment being made in the project management side. Again, more functionality around project schedules, use of templates, supporting projects bigger than 500 tasks, the concept of baselines, which has been in projects since the 90s, now moving that into Project for the Web, being able to actually take a planner plan and upgrade that into a Project for the Web project, linking different plans and tasks, things like charts and visuals, not in Power BI, but actually in the core tool, lead and lag support, which is important for critical path, things like goals and email notifications. All these things are what Microsoft has kind of in its roadmap. And that roadmap is really driven by feedback from folks like you, getting on the user voice site and updating, hey, I'd like to see this in Project or Project for the Web. So these are really some of the things Microsoft's working on, again, building out the functionality around things like workflows. You're starting to see more and more functions coming for Project for the Web. Project Pro and Project Online has pretty much been a steady state application for a bit now. So on the Project Desktop client side, we've seen there was recently a 2021 version. There was a 2019 and a 2016 before that. Microsoft has updated a lot of the visual icons that are there to make it a lot more streamlined, so it works alongside and feels like Office. And a lot of the reports, there's kind of a little new UI there around some of the reports, and things are being tweaked there as well. So not a lot of changes. Most people are feeling pretty familiar and don't want a lot of changes in Project. Again, on the PWA or the Project Online side, still not a lot of changes, pretty steady state. Microsoft continues to tweak the administrative side of things in terms of splicing out data into different categories and things, as well as on the PWA side, you'll see the Resource Center was recently changed so you can kind of play with graphs and charts in a little different way. And in with the old, out with the old. Project Server, which years ago there was a Project Server 2016, a 2019 version. There's actually, believe it or not, there's a 2021 version now that was released back in October and November. So, on-premise is dead, long live on-premise. It's still out there. And Microsoft released Project Server, it's called Subscription Edition, in alignment with SharePoint on-premise as well. So that was released in November. It is a subscription-based license for on-premise software. So they're trying to move everybody to a subscription month-by-month basis, just like the rest of Office 365, but you can deploy it on-premise. And today you have the right to do that. If you buy cloud software, you can always deploy it on-premise. In this case, this is a on-premise piece of software. And we find a lot of organizations in heavily regulated industries like this. They can put it out in the Azure cloud. They can put it on their own servers. If they're not fully all in 365, or they really want to own the data behind it, it's a really good approach. Again, it aligns with SharePoint 2021 on-premise, so you do need a SharePoint 2021 farm to run Project Server 2021 or Project Server Subscription Edition. And then with the latest version of Project Server, you can use either Project Professional 2019, 2021, or the Project Online Professional Desktop Client in Office 365 to connect into that from a project manager's perspective. So they generally do support the current and one version back. So if you are thinking about upgrading, 2021 is pretty much a snapshot of where Project Server 2019 was, just it's going to be supported for a couple of more years. And also they released, on-premise is dead, long live on-premise, the cube building service, which was something that was part of Project Server 2003 and 2007, kind of got cut with 2010. It's kind of back with SQL Server analysis services now, and the ability to build different cubes and analysis services and access them with either Power BI server or SQL SSRS. So that's really what's new with all the different iterations of project. You see there's a lot of investment in the Project for the Web because that is a high growth space. If you look at the marketplace and what's going on with tools like Smartsheet and Asana and Basecamp, that's kind of where they see a lot of the growth in the market, and they continue to support the other applications. Annie, we'll see if there are any questions on that. Look at the QA manager, I don't see anything.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else either, Rob.
Okay. Great.
In our final session, we'll be providing you with some guidance as to where the overall project management tools market is today and share some good practices based upon what we are seeing in the market. As we are nearing wrapping up today's session, our hope was that everyone found good value from our presentation and discussions today.
Thanks, Annie. So our agenda today, what we're going to be talking about is, where are the project management tools? We'll talk about, where's the market today? What's driving the market forward? What are some of the key trends? Because this is changing right now. What tools do people really need? What functionality do they need? What are the analysts saying about this? And also we'll talk a little bit about, crises and COVID and how that has really changed our perception of the kind of tools people need today. What are users looking for? And importantly, how can you be prepared to act given all these changes that are in the marketplace today? So let's start with talk about, what do we consider to be a project management tool if we get back to really the foundational concepts? In traditional terms, a project management tool manages certain things. It manages project schedules, really important to know the work you're performing, the activities, the milestones, the deliverables, when things are going to happen, the ability to model that out. It manages project resources, who's working on projects and what else are they working on. It can help you collect time and collect how many hours people are working against different kinds of activities. It can help you report on the data, whether it's projects, resources, tasks, portfolios. You heard a lot about that from our panel today. It can help you organize your project artifacts, things like documents and deliverables. It helps you organize the portfolio, as you heard from Justin, the ability to roll information up across a PMO or governance, to really look at multiple projects in one place. And finally, it does assist with process automation throughout your entire PM lifecycle. So instead of having everything in documents and people are on shared drives, you have it in a single automated system. So this is what we think of a traditional project management tool. I'm here to tell you this is changing and it has been changing for some time. These are really, really important parts of most project management tools, but the market has been changing really for the last 10 or 15 years. And if we look at that, what's driving that is trends. We can look back, in the 1990s, from a project management tools perspective, that was really the emergence of centralized scheduling systems, the concept of Gantt and PERT in a visual tool environment on a personal computer or PC. We had our first tools there. As we moved into the late 90s, we started to get into enterprise project scheduling, storing all your schedules in one place, using standard enterprise templates. We had basic concepts of collaborative technology starting to emerge. This was really the beginning of collaboration at an enterprise level. We had our first enterprise database systems that were driven by project management, tools like Primavera and Artemis and Niku, Clarity, and PlanView, some of the initial tools. Microsoft Project had its birth actually in the early 90s as a way to visualize information. Bill Gates was a big fan of it. He wanted to see information, and Gantt charts were a great visual for that. Microsoft continued to move and kind of follow the market here. And then we had our initial, what we call portfolio management tools emerging in the late 90s. These were concepts and tools by tools like companies like Pacific Edge and UMT that were trying to take more of a top-down view of the different markets and say, hey, how do we plan out at a portfolio level, not just the activities and milestones and deliverables? Early to mid 2000s, we saw the emergence of enterprise project management, or EPM, and that was really the bringing together of technologies to take scheduling and collaboration and data to the next level. We started to see the development and deployment of integrated collaborative technologies on an enterprise scale. Really, the first version of SharePoint was 2000, 2001, 2003. By 2007, it was getting fairly mature, and organizations were adopting tools like SharePoint at an enterprise level for intranets, portals, and dashboards. We started to see the wave 2 of portfolio management as these tools started to mature. And we started to see EPM become more of a mainstream concept. The analysts were talking about it. They were talking about improving processes, aligning EPM with the PMO. And by 2010, it got to be a fairly mature technology. With the mid 2010s to 2020, we saw the concept of project portfolio management moving from EPM to PPM, more of a centralized governance approach. We saw the first wave of Agile tools start to really grow as the Agile Manifesto came out in the early 2000s. Now tools came out, Jira, version 1, Rally, TFS was out there as well. Portfolio management started to really emerge as its own domain, and it became more strategic in nature. So it's not just about the tactical delivery, but the strategic planning and execution of the entire portfolio. And we started to see some consolidation across industry. If we look at this, there are some important changes that happened over the last 10 years that do impact where the entire tools market is going and where Microsoft's going as well. So the first of those is really Agile, and Agile really emerging as a mainstream methodology for development organizations. And if you go into almost any Fortune 500 company today, 95% of them are using Agile in some way. It may be hybrid, it may be, safe Agile, but Agile has been taking hold of the last 6 or 7 years. Even in government, we're seeing it as well. The entry of millennials into the workforce over the last 10 years, they have different expectations of how technology needs to work. And it's not the old complex kludgy way, but it's more iPhone-like expectations. Tools need to be single purpose, they need to be easy, they need to be visual. And the millennials are the ones that are now dragging to their mid-late 30s, getting up to 40. They're starting to become managers in a lot of these organizations and leaders in these companies. They have the expectation of tools working a certain way. We also saw the emergence of a whole new suite of technologies called work management tools. And these were targeting information workers that didn't have a really good way to collaborate on work. And that would kind of grow up into work becomes projects. So this is where we get the definition of the occasional project manager, people that would jump into Asana and start planning and managing their work and their tasks. Or Smartsheet, really the growth of Smartsheet really calls to this marketplace. Or if you watch Monday.com, that's another company that's been growing in this market. Those tools have a big impact on project management tools as well, because they're all growing up into being project management tools now, because they're giving people what they need at a base level, and then they're becoming more mature as they get built onto. Finally, we're seeing consolidation in the industry. We're seeing a lot of acquisition. Clarity, which used to be owned by CA, was bought by Broadcom. CA bought Rally before that, which is an Agile tool. So now you have a suite there. PlanView went out and bought LeanKit for Agile and Project Place for lighter project management. ChangePoint went out and bought Adaptive. Oracle bought ProSite and Primavera, and they continue to merge in the market. So there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry where kind of the enterprise players in PPM are now buying the low to mid-tier players and rolling them together, and also making investments on the strategy side. So there's really been a lot of changes in the marketplace that really impact where we are, but more importantly, where we're going. So, if we look at Gartner actually now talks about, it used to be PPM. Now there are two distinct spaces for project management tools. First of those, and I think you want to start thinking about tools in this different context, is what we call adaptive project management and reporting. The second category is strategic portfolio management. So you can see they're actually breaking out more execution and more strategy into two different areas. On the adaptive side, if we look at the 2020 market survey, it's support for project and work management tools at an enterprise level that separates out the work and the execution level planning from strategic monitoring of the portfolio and decision making. So they're really separating these things out. Again, separating out work from decision making, but it's really, they're taking a lot of the traditional tools to have better reporting tools. They need to support continuous delivery cycles. They need to support Agile. And with the emergence of a lot of these new vendors we mentioned in the previous slide, we can support both use cases. So when you think about it, adaptive project management and reporting is all about the planning and execution of the work related to your projects. Strategic portfolio management is broken out, and they start pointing to different organizations. So they call SROs, strategy realization organizations, EPMOs and your traditional PMOs, quote unquote, using technology supported strategy execution management as part of a change enablement program. So they're starting to think at a higher level, how do I plan out the program, the initiatives, the KPIs and the OKRs? This is an emerging technology area, and they're saying this is a development, right? There's developing technologies here. You've got scaled Agile happening, you have product management at an enterprise level, digital transformation, you've got investment management, all of this is happening, and you're going to have different tools potentially that do what's on the right from what's on the left. It's very hard to have one tool that does everything. So, you really want to start thinking about where the challenges and pain points are and where that's going to be. And, where you start and where you go really depends on your process, your maturity, your methodology, and also, I think Ernest mentioned it, your leadership and, where the leadership wants to go and getting them involved and tying them into a lot of your strategy and goals. And we tend to think about it, most people say it's crawl, walk, run. We also say fly, right? And at a crawl level, you're really thinking about basic project management, blocking and tackling of scheduling, basic reporting and collaboration and task management. We start working at walking, that's when we're into intake and demand management. We're thinking about each of these work streams as a different set of processes that are all going to contribute to our value in delivering as a PMO. We've got resource management capacity planning. We're going to start integrating governance process and workflow and automation throughout our life cycle. We start to continue to mature schedule management and reporting. Reporting is always improving, scheduling is always improving, and collaboration is always improving as well. We start to pull in things like time tracking and time management as a component of that, and also portfolio reporting. Organizations that are also looking to try to scale out Agile and integrate Agile and their Waterfall, that's where Agile work management comes into play. Some of the things we talked about in the first session. We start looking at integrated financials and financial management. That does take some maturity, and that's more of a high walk, low run. And then strategic portfolio selection and modeling and the program management and digital transformation, that's more of the higher end. So you really want to think about, where are you as an organization? What's your maturity? Where are you today and where do you want to get to? What processes are going to help you get there? And that'll help you select the right technology. So we start looking at, what do people need from these tools? On the adaptive side on the left, if you're a no or low maturity organization, you're really looking for 4 or 5 different things. You're starting to think about, I need visual planning tools just for the masses to go in and plan their tasks and activities. I need a way to report off all that information in a meaningful way, charts and graphs and dashboards, without having to extract everything and put it in Excel. I want basic task management. I want people to be able to go in and update their progress on activities. And I'm not as concerned about % complete or this or that or timesheets. I just want to get progress. I want to be able to allow external users to come in and interface with this because I always have collaborators involved that may be outside my organization. And I also want document management. It's really important that we share all our artifacts. So if you're kind of a low or no maturity organization, that's kind of a starting point. Think of that kind of as your crawl. As your maturity moves up, you start adding these other capabilities. Things like more detailed project scheduling, the ability to do resource capacity and utilization management. You have to have some maturity to do that. You have to start thinking about time tracking if you're going to do that, or detailed scheduling. May want to do cost management or ERP integration, or things like automated status reporting, or that multiple methodologies in a single environment. That does take some more maturity, but that's more on the adaptive side on the left. On the right, and this is where we're starting to think about things like scenario modeling. That's a key requirement. Or I really want to visualize information and drag and drop parts of portfolios or programs to different places and see what value I would get from those. So more about value realization. Starting to look at goals and metrics and OKRs. Integration with execution tools. So taking what's on the right and integrating it with what's on the left, or taking what's on the left and bubble it up to the right so you have the actual information, and then you can map that up to what your forecast was and start to see that. You want to start to do product level and service level mapping. Gartner's talked a lot about that the last 3 or 4 years, moving from projects to products. And in Agile organizations, that transformation is already happening. You want to be able to do cost integration and integrate cost information in terms of cost, value, benefits, ROI. And then that value realization and tracking. So when you're thinking about it, really the questions you want to ask is, what do you need? And what value are you looking for from a single tool or a set of tools that can help you get there? So the reality, what does all this mean? The reality is there's a high probability that you're going to be supporting multiple PM tools in one environment. There's no one tool that fits everybody. If you think about different groups and their needs, not everybody's going to fit into Project Online, right? Not everybody's going to fit into Azure DevOps. Not everybody's going to fit into Planner. You have to think about, how do I support them? And do I want everybody to be with a single vendor? Or am I going to have to support multiple vendors? You also want to start thinking about an integration strategy. And integration doesn't always mean technical. It can also often mean process or reporting. What is my strategy between the different types of work processes we have and the tools we have? And this is a super opportunity for the PMO to really take a leadership role. And we've found kind of strong PMOs are saying, hey, we want to lead the charge with this. We want to not only help select the tools by listening to users, but we want to help integrate them so we get a full picture of all the work going on across the organization. Remember, you may be involved in evaluating tools that you may never have looked at before. They may have funny names. Monday.com, wasn't even around 5 years ago. So, non-traditional tools are really growing. Agile tools are growing. And if you think about it, you may have people in a marketing capacity, in mergers and acquisitions or operations project management. It's very different than IT project management or engineering project management. You may have folks in the facilities or construction space. We've had, hits from a couple different organizations that are looking to do facilities project management. We have a couple county governments that are doing all their construction project management in these tools. And also, digital transformation management is bigger. It's really program management that's going to transform the organization, that ties all your projects and products together all in one place. So it has a tie into Agile as well. So start thinking about, what is this going to mean? And you may be looking at different technologies, and how do I integrate them from a process and tool perspective? So, big question, how do we get started with this? The first thing we'd recommend is you want to keep an open mind. A lot of these modern tools may be a good fit. So even if at first glance it looks too simple or too easy, maybe the people that need it need something very simple and easy. And maybe overwhelming them with a tool that's too big may not work, and you may not get the data you need to make decisions. So keep an open mind. But also, as you would with any initiative in the PMO, focus on the business outcomes the group has needs in. Sit down with the folks in marketing or operations. At the end of the day, what are you trying to get out of this? What's the issue you're trying to solve? Who does it impact? What results are you looking for? Then let's start looking at the requirements and what tool might help you get there. You'll probably find 90% of the time, you'll probably already have that tool in your environment. And people are out there looking at sexy web-based tools when they should be looking inside where you can own and manage the data. You want to develop that formal set of requirements for the tools and map these over to what products are out there, but also the value and the long-term viability of some of these companies. Importantly, we find a lot of organizations that are driven by Agile kind of leave the selection of the Agile tool up to the development teams, and that's sometimes not a great idea. You want the PMO to be involved because the PMO has a good structure for making evaluations, assessing tools. It's what you do. You help other parts of the organization do this, help them evaluate the right Agile tool and think in terms of what's best for the enterprise, not just what's best for the dev side. And we find a lot of times the Agile tools are handed their choice. They come in, there's not as much structure, and then aligning that gets very difficult after the fact. You want to ask a lot of questions about data security. And what is the data security policy of the solution provider you're talking to? With Microsoft, you kind of already know the answer. If you're looking for third-party tools, you want to get really, really detailed about this. A lot of these web-based tools, where is the data stored? Is it stored? Is it secure at rest? They can pose risk to the data that you have, and if it's organizational data, that's important. And remember, a lot of people want to have the decision makers be the users of the tool. Who's going to use it is really important to interview and get them as part of the evaluation process. But at the end of the day, your agency, your company, you're the ones paying for the tool. It's your data. And when someone leaves the organization, you need to own that data. So remember that you're paying for it and you are the customer of the actual product. And finally, separate the strategy side from the execution side. They will tie together because you certainly want to strategize about potential projects and investments. That should really be on the left. The strategy, the SPM side on the right is really going to help you drive top-level decision making. Before we wrap up, I do want to talk a little bit about the impact COVID has had. And obviously, it's had a big impact on a lot of us. With everybody working remote, the tool market has changed. These tools have actually become even more important than they were before. Now that we have distributed workers that all need to use technology to communicate, they need to do the same thing with their projects. We just can't get in a physical room as much and actually get together and go through that, which is changing now. And we'll also tell you that the battle between Teams and Zoom is really, really important. It's really a battle for the modern OS. If you think about it, we find that, if we talk to clients, they spend 90% of their day now in one application, in Microsoft Teams. So what organizations are starting to think is, well, maybe I need to drive other apps through Teams. Maybe I need to have my time tracking system hooked up through Teams, or my collaboration technology, or my ERP application all hooked up in Teams. So companies are starting to reconsider the delivery model behind different applications they have. And that's really driving a lot of data sprawl. We're finding organizations, again, are trying to plug everything into Teams and setting up a team for this and a team for that without necessarily putting the structure behind it and the application behind it. And now we're moving from, we had way too much Lotus Notes to SharePoint was everywhere, now Teams proliferation. So we have to do it in a really thoughtful way. And as we move, out of this period of chaos into more control, we're always going to need better project management tools to make decisions and to execute on those decisions all in one place. So, project management tools are becoming just as important as they ever were to understand what projects are we working on, how are those projects doing, where are the critical resources, and how do we plan and reallocate? And the reality is in the future, there's going to be other kinds of chaos, other kind of disasters that are out there. We're going to have, climate disasters, public health crises. COVID is just the start, unfortunately, of all of this stuff. And hopefully, hopefully things will get better and better. But the reality is we need to work more collaboratively and use a lot of the technologies that are out there. So as you're looking at your tools, whether you're looking at new tools to bring in or existing tools, think more broadly, think about what your users need and understand there may be multiple tools supporting project management because project management is going to mean different things to different people in your enterprise. Okay. So with that, we're going to see if there are any questions. Annie?
I see a couple questions in the chat. Which is the best resource to keep tabs on when these features will roll?
It's a good question. So Microsoft, if you go to the Office 365 roadmap website, and we can send you a link to that as well, that lists all of the roadmap items, what's in progress, what's been released, and what's coming on the micro, and you just type in project in that search. So we can send you out a link to that.
Here's another question. Is Project Online/Server CSOM supported and improved? If so, what are the latest changes?
It's a good question. So yeah, CSOM is the API for Project Online and Project Server. It is still supported. As far as we know, it really hasn't changed much in the last 2 to 3 years. So I would have to check with our dev team, but we really haven't seen any changes to CSOM or JSOM in the last 2 years. So.
Here's another question. I think it's addressed at our panel. How useful were the trainings that PROJILITY provides to help PMs with efficient usage and adoption of this PPM tool post-implementation?
Cheryl, Ernest, and Justin, if you're still there, any thoughts on training?
Yeah, sure. This is Justin. Well, no, you go ahead first.
Yeah, just ask the question one more time. My volume was turned down a little bit.
How useful were the trainings that PROJILITY provides to help PMs with efficient usage and adoption of this PPM tool post-implementation?
Well, I'm gonna shout a kudos out to Thomas, who was their trainer. He did an excellent job. I really appreciate his in-depth knowledge of the system. And we also purchased, and which I highly recommend, ongoing support. And every time we run into a roadblock or we don't know how to do something, we send them an email. 99% of the time, it's Thomas that answers it and works with us and helps us with the issues that we're having. So it's not just the training, because you're going to get trained and then you're going to do something in the system and you're not going to know how to get around it. And you really need somebody, even if it's not PROJILITY, to have that level of knowledge to support you through those issues. And we've had a ton of them in the last 6 months.
Cheryl, Ernest, any thoughts on training?
That was Ernest speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl and Justin. It's my fault. Sorry, Ernest.
Yeah. I'll add to that. With we use many methods, so I think it's important to meet users where they are, and everyone has a different learning style. So we recently had purchased the kind of like the subscription to the e-learning and had that customized, the PROJILITY e-learning, and that was very helpful to a certain user group that was really new to using Project. Now, I took the training like 3 different times because of working with PROJILITY to tweak things and adjust it, so it really spoke to our instance of Project Server. And I found that even there were tips in there that I was like, oh, I didn't know how to do that. So the e-learning has been very helpful to a certain user group. And then we have also that subscription to a best practice video training. But then there's also the PROJILITY blog and the YouTube channel, and there's so much content that I kind of in my one job aid page just list out all the different items, and people will gravitate toward the learning style or the teaching style that they learn best in. So I think giving some options has been really helpful.
Yeah, and I'll agree with all that too. The training that we received as part of our implementation, it was definitely key to get everyone up and running, and it was useful. I wouldn't go without it. And we found that the level of expertise of the people that we worked with were, I've got 1 or 2 people on our project office who are the ultimate Microsoft project nerds. And, it was fun because PROJILITY matched that, so we could geek out about project, and we all learned a lot. And I'll add that the subscription service that these guys launched, what was it, last year? Probably we did subscribe to that because what I've noticed is we get new project managers in, if they're permanent or contractors, I make them go through that. I make them go through all the courses. I even had everyone who was a resident here already for years go through the e-learning because it put us all on the same learning baseline. So we're all coming from the same standpoint, and that has been very useful as well.
Thanks for taking extra questions, everyone. Any other questions?
No, I think that wraps up our discussion for today. Now on to the fun. Before we wrap up, we are raffling off a few project-specific items. In order to enter, you must complete our short survey, which will be sent in a link in our event follow-up email. Enter for the chance to win a copy of our latest book release, Ultimate Study Guide for Microsoft Project 2019, a copy of our Managing Enterprise Projects Using Project Online and Project Server 2019. We're giving away 1 license to our self-paced e-learning course, which helps your project managers and team members learn and improve on their foundational Microsoft project skills, as well as presents advanced concepts required for success in most environments. We're also raffling off a cute plush hammerhead and a crowd favorite, the hammerhead wine key. I'll be sending all attendees a link to our survey. By filling it out, you will register for the drawing. Winners will be chosen at random tomorrow, so please submit your surveys in the next 24 hours. We do want to provide you with access to some of our educational resources for you and your team. Subscribe to our best practice YouTube channel to find topics ranging from managing your digital transformation program using PPM technologies to integrating PPM with Agile and line of business applications. Feel free to access this library at any time and share with your colleagues. Our YouTube tips and tricks library for your PMs. Subscribe to our tips and tricks playlist for bi-weekly snippets on how to improve and use within Project Online. You can also find and register for other PROJILITY upcoming educational events using our Eventbrite link. Our PROJILITY's blog, where you can find lots of great topics at projility.com/blog. Our general PROJILITY website to learn more about our solutions and services. Finally, feel free to subscribe to the Project and Planner user group available on LinkedIn. There are over 25,000 active community members to collaborate with. Thank you all again for your time. And if you have any further questions, you're interested in discussing project for your organization, or you would like to review any specific decks from today's sessions, please feel free to reach out to me, Annie Levan, at the email address provided on the screen. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you for joining us.